Hi, my name's Kaitlin and I'm going to explain some stories of me growing up. Well, first is my mother always called me her little character. And so I would go around introducing myself as, "Hi, I'm Kaitlin and I'm Mommy's little character. How are you?" So that's just who I was. I was the creative, imaginative, funky little girl who I always had a humor about me. And I always wanted to make people smile and laugh. And so I'm going to tell you some stories that I will be passing on from generation to generation to explain of who their mother, grandmother, great-grandmother was. So here's some. Here's one that explains my mischievous character at the time. So I was watching Snow White and my mom had just painted the walls white. I wanted to color, however, so I colored with my midnight blue crayon. It was my favorite color. Well, when I did that, my mother came into the room after I was done, of course, and she said, "Kaitlin, someone colored on my walls with a midnight blue crayon." She said, "I wonder who that could have been." And I told her, "Mommy," without missing a beat, "it was Snow White." It definitely got a laugh, and that was just something that explained my character. So another thing that helped me through as a kid was my imaginary friend Shailene. She always took the blame for everything, so I didn't have to get in trouble. She was such a lifesaver growing up. Well, I was watching Land Before Time one time on the television, and the animated dinosaur movie, and Sarah the Triceratops called a friend a butthead. Well, I have never heard that word before, and I thought that was the coolest word ever. So I decided to call my sister, the coolest sister ever, a butthead because I thought it would fit, but of course it didn't, and boy did I get a rise out of her. Well, my mother told me if I called my sister butthead one more time, I would get my mouth washed out with soap. So to make this story a little shorter, it did not end well for my mouth. But to make up for it, Shailene helped me out. This is where she comes in. We were driving in the car one day, and I looked at my mom and I said, "Mom, I want to tell you something." And she said, "What is it, Kaitlin?" And I told her, "Mom, Shailene just called you a butthead." So that was how she always helped me out. She always said what I wanted to say, but I was too afraid to. So she always helped me out. Well, even though I had a mischievous side, I could also be pretty sensitive. Well, with a side of humor, of course. So I was watching a children's program, and it was titled The Lord's Prayer. And my mother's maiden name is Debtor with an E-R. Well, whenever it gets to the part where it says, "Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors," I looked at my mother adoringly and I said, "Mommy, they forgive you." So that was just one that my mom loves to tell me, and she tells me all the time about that story, and I think it's a great story to tell. It explains about who I was and my quick wit and what I thought. So another story is about my creativity and my imagination. I was going to have a garage sale one day, and of course I didn't want to sell my own things, so I got a little bit creative. I went outside and I found some big rocks, and of course I washed them because I can't sell dirty rocks, don't know buy them. And then I painted them. And I set up a table at the end of our driveway, and you have to keep in mind, I lived out in the country where there was no one. I mean no one. The nearest house was like forever's away except for my grandfather's, and that's where he comes in. My grandfather lived right next door to us, and he was a very kind and loving grandpa. So I loaded up the rocks in my red wagon, and I went over to his house and I knocked on the door and I said, "Grandpa, I'm selling pretty rocks." And of course he couldn't resist, and he bought a rock for $5. I mean, $5. Come on. I was a pretty good salesperson. So now you have a glimpse into my childhood and who I was and my creativity and imagination. I was creative, mischievous, quick-witted, and caring. I had a lot of great characteristics about me growing up, and I'm so blessed to have a family that would let me express those. So, I like to use humor to cope with everyday stress, and it comes into play with how I was when I was a child. That's how I still use that humor in a more serious atmosphere. I love to make people happy. I don't like to see people down, and I don't want them to be sad. That's not fun. So I always try to make things a little bit more fun whenever I'm around people. But now I have 3 wonderful little nephews, and I get to watch them use their mischievous sides too now. So it's kind of a little bit of a payback, but also kind of fun, because whenever they do this to me, I can just send them home. So, thank you, and that's my stories.